I've spent 2 years trying to get into jail. Now, most people who are in jail do so because they've done something stupid or incredibly evil. But the worst thing I've done, or that I'm going to tell you about, is when I was younger, I snuck across the golf course at the back of our house with my brother because he wanted to fill his jam jar with frog spawn. Now, he was caught, and they locked him up in a shed overnight to teach him a lesson. But I got away scot-free, and I've still got a clean record. So why did I want to break into a prison? Reading, books and reading, that's why. You see, in my day job, I sell books. I recommend books. I run book clubs. I start book clubs. Anybody who listen, I'll tell them about books. And I had this idea that maybe I could bring the book club idea to a less advantaged group of society. Which is why I eventually got permission from the governor of a men's prison to run a club once a month. Cold February evening, I found myself in there, and I was thinking on the way in, the library would be, a decent size, plenty of seats. I'd say a lot of people would come because they'd got plenty of time, they'd find it interesting. And I'd already recommended the book, so they'd have read it, and hopefully most of them would have enjoyed it. And there would, of course, be a very bored-looking prison guard sitting in purely for my protection. The 2 librarians, wonderful women, brought me in on that first evening. And it's like going through airport security. And then when you get in, it's one unlocked door after another. So you have to stand there, wait till the prison guard has a few minutes, he opens it up, you go through, he locks it, and then you're off for another door. And then eventually you find yourself on the wing, and then in the tiniest library I have ever been in. In fact, my bedroom is bigger, and I probably have more books as well. And Jeremy. So the 2 librarians did what they had to do, and then they went off, wishing me well. And I was left with Jeremy, who, by the way, was a lifer, and I think most of you know what that means. And Jeremy shut the door. No, he said, no one else is going to come this evening because they were out in the yard and somebody threw some drugs over and they couldn't resist, so they've lost their privileges. And no, there wouldn't be a bored guard sitting in. I knew that now. They were far too busy running the prison. And anyway, there wouldn't be enough room for one. And no, he didn't read the book. It wasn't his kind of thing. It didn't really interest him. And for 7 minutes, he told me why. It was like playing chicken. Eventually, I said, Jeremy, why don't you open the door? Because you never know who'll come in. And he did. And they came in, one after the other. And I'd stand up and I'd say, hello, my name is Mary. I'm here to run a book club. Would you like to join us? And they were very pleasant and polite, and they shook my hand. And the odd one would say, sure, we haven't got time to be sitting around reading books. And I discovered that prisoners are constantly preoccupied. If they're not working or doing maintenance, they're in classes, or else they're waiting on the phone. They're always waiting on the phone. There's 2 phones on the wing, and they always need to talk to their family and their kids. Then again, they're down in the gym. They love going to the gym. Well, I went back once a month, and I got a lovely group of lads together. They were great. And they would sometimes read the book, but we had some great discussions around a small, wobbly table with 5 plastic chairs. And it was great to see some of the lads that came in the beginning and they could hardly hold their heads up. And they would sit up a bit straighter, and they became opinionated and confident and open. And sometimes one or other of them would start talking and they'd tell you something about their lives. And you could see that the events they were talking about were probably what led them all the way into prison. Now, maybe I had worked out, maybe reading would help them to get another perspective on life, because reading fiction helps to create empathy. Now, most of us learn empathy at home with our mums and dads, but if you come from a very chaotic background, who's going to teach you that? Why do we send people to jail? Is it just to make them suffer? Or perhaps we should use that time to help them turn their lives around. Otherwise, it's like a revolving door, and they're back in again at the taxpayer's expense. Now, if you look at it, it actually costs an awful lot of money to put somebody in jail. It will be cheaper to put them up in a top hotel with room service. So back I went, month after month. And things were going around in my head, like I had read that in Brazil, they have this program that the criminals can enroll in. And it's called Redemption Through Reading. And they can actually reduce their sentence by partaking and participating in this program. And they're going to do it in Italy as well. And why? Because it works. Now, I have to be honest. I don't always feel like going in, especially in the winter months. It's cold. I don't want a long bus journey. And then going through that airport security and all the locked doors and sitting in this stuffy, airless little room. But when I go home on the bus, I take things with me, like the guy who always makes me a cup of tea. He has a tiny kettle, he runs off to his cell, and he comes back with a black cup of tea for me, and he says, "That's your mug." Love that. Or they tell me things. One guy, and to be perfectly honest, I wasn't quite sure if he could read at all in the beginning. He told me that Dubliners by James Joyce is his favourite book of all. And whenever he finds himself in jail, he makes sure that the librarians have a copy so he can keep it in his cell with them. And joy of joys, whenever they actually read the book that I give them. And they love it. Like the time Ian came out to the door and he said, "That was the best book I have ever read." It was called A Street Cat Named Bob by James Bowen. Now, there was an evening there near the end when it was Christmas, and there was stars in the sky, beautiful night. And up until then, I had been quite careful, keep my distance, sort of teacherly attitude. And they were all in great form. I don't know how Santa was going to get in the prison, but they were all excited. And at the end of the meeting, each of them came up and gave me a hug. And it nearly brought tears to my eyes because I realized actually they're just guys. They're just like my brothers. And I loved them. One evening, Ian came in. They were all excited because they had made me a gift. And what it was is a piece of wood. And etched on it was a pair of hands, the palms up. And there were seeds on the palm and two little birds, quite trusting on the palm. And on the top it says, "We cannot all do great things, but we can do small things with great love." And whenever I doubt myself and I think, what am I doing in a men's prison talking about books and reading, those words come back to me and they prop me up. We cannot all do great things, but we can do small things with love.